morning to you. Today is Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And to provide context for today, I'll continue sharing my observations of a listed company I am following on the London Stock Exchange, which is going through a restructuring and refinancing process, which is a very complex one. And one thing I realize is that a high percentage of revenues are coming from government contracts. So yesterday, I talked about why headcount-led recovery plans break under scrutiny, right? So when you have a lot of billable hours and certain processes, and you are not productizing your IP and going into a more asset style of revenues or backing revenues by assets, that could be a big problem. But today I'm going to move from what is going inside the company to what is going outside the company, from internal economics, if you may, to external defense. And why I'm saying external defense is because of this big amount of, or the big percentage of government contracts. Specifically, I'm going to talk about digital sovereignty and ecosystem trust. And here we go again. You may say boards hear sovereignty and they think politics, but markets hear sovereignty and they think reliability. And regulators hear sovereignty and they think resilience obligations, right? And there's a lot of changes in the past 2 months. So let's separate two things here. One is the positioning of the company. What is the company's perceived so far before or while going through all these changes? And the second thing that we need to separate is the evidence. So let's take these two things and three problems that I see already. One is the UK cyber policy is clear. Resilience is a national priority now. So, well, always been, but actually today more than ever. The UK national cyber strategy sets out the government's intent to strengthen the UK cyber resilience and protect the services the public relies on. When resilience becomes a national priority, supplier trusts become a board-level risk now, rather than a technical detail. So, problem number two, regulation is tightening around cyber resilience and critical services. The government introduced the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill to the Parliament on the 12th of November 2025. This is literally 2 months to the date now. So it's a new bill introduced in Parliament with the stated purpose of reforming and adding to the network of Information System Regulations 2018, a strengthened UK defense. So when the compliance perimeter starts to expand, trusted supplier status becomes harder to keep through narrative alone. Yeah, you can control the narrative without evidence, allegedly, in a smaller environment. But now they are expanding this. So it's harder to become a trusted supplier just on narrative. You will have to provide a lot of evidence now, and I'm going to show you what it is about. So in this PLC that I'm observing, they have several contracts and close relationships with supplying government and their requirements, and a strong ecosystem position. But it also undergoing restructuring and an operational model change. In this situation, the biggest risk is not the competition, it's a contract churn triggered by any perceived decline in delivery confidence, cyber assurance, or the supply chain control, right? So you can see that actually we expand the perimeter. So now it's not about a decline, it's not about a competition anymore, it's about how we continue being the trusted supplier for all these bids that we have perhaps for years. So in simple terms, sovereignty without control is like a castle with impressive walls and open gates. So there's nobody watching at the gates and they are wide open. And here's a nuance that makes this lesson useful for any board. The advantage is real. Government and regulated sector relationships are sticky when the trust is high. But the trust, as anything else, particularly when regulator is expanding, is conditional. It depends on whether customers believe, customer in this case, the government that the company are servicing, believe you can keep essential services running, protect sensitive data, and manage third parties. And this is why boards should treat sovereignty as an operating discipline, not comms themes. So in practice, you may see the questions customers ask, and again, customers is a government contract that you have there, are very simple, but very brutal. Can you evidence your cyber resilience? Can you evidence supply chain control? Can you evidence incident readiness? And the key word here all the time is evidence, evidence, evidence. So the UK National Cybersecurity Center and the Cyber Assets Assessment Framework exist for exactly this reason. It provides a systematic approach to assessing cyber risk to essential functions. So boards can use the consider all factors style thinking to demand evidence, not reassurance. So we have to start to pull evidence all the time now. And the supply chain is where many public companies or limited companies fail, unfortunately. So the National Cyber Security Center publishes principles of supply chain security to help organizations establish effective controls and oversight. And here's a little nonsense for you. If you didn't have this under your radar, by the way. So ecosystems, the trust in this ecosystem that you build throughout all these years is often lost through suppliers, not through your own core platform. So, given these scenarios, so as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider in this case, number one, turn sovereignty into a board pack with evidence. So consider all factor style thinking as the baseline for what good looks like in essential functions, then ask management for gaps, owners, dates, and which is assurance. And also the essential functions, right? So when you consider all factors style thinking, that gives you as a board member or as a board as a whole, a common language to challenge cyber risk without pretending to be technical. You cannot have engineers all the time in the board. So the all factor style thinking gives you those capacities. Number two is make the supply chain security explicit and measurable. Adopt the National Cybersecurity Center supply chain security principles as the board's minimum expectation for critical suppliers, subcontractors, and data processors. So sovereignty advantages collapses if the supply chains cannot be governed. And remember that actually it's not about what the good job that you've been doing all these years. The failures sometimes come through the supply chains. And this is another little nuances, if you may. And suggestion number three is use the UK governance expectation to force clarity. So the UK corporate governance codes and its guidance emphasize board responsibility for principal risk and internal controls. So a trusted supplier status should sit in principal risk with control evidence, not in the brand slides. And here is the keyword again, control evidence. And when I mention brand slides, many companies rely on saying, oh, our cloud services are provided by the XYZ, international company with all these fancy marketing recognition, brand recognition, etc. But do you have control evidence that really is what they say in the logo or in the team? So very careful with that. So if you let cyber assurance and operation assurance drift during that situation, the customers are not going to wait. And remember, the customers are, in these cases, or in this particular case, the government contracts that you have there. So they protect themselves, which means they rebid contracts, add oversight, withhold scope, or walk away. So sovereignty is not only market access, it's a retention engine of the good job that a company has been doing for many, many years, but only if you can prove resilience. And again, we're going to resilience, and this is back to provision 29 of the 2024 UK Corporate Governance Code that strengthens expectation around risk management and internal controls, including a requirement for declarations of the effectiveness of material control. So cyber and supplier controls are exactly the kind of controls boards will be expected to evidence, not describe. Remember, it's not about the narrative, it's the evidence. And again, the key word here is evidence. So why this matters? For three things: outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of outcomes, the UK National Cyber Strategy provides boards with a strategic anchor for why resilience and trusted supply matter to national capabilities and essential services. This supports more challenging board questions, even when management wants to move quickly. Number two is the differentiator. The Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill signals increased regulatory focus on cyber resilience obligations for critical service and supply chains. When regulation tightens, the cost of weak assurance rises fast, including reputational and contractual consequences. You can lose your contracts. And how that reduce your risk. The National Cybersecurity Centers consider all factors, style thinking, and supply chain principles, provide practical and recognized frameworks that boards can use to demand evidence-based maturity. So sovereignty becomes a mode when assurance is systematic, repeatable, and auditable. Now, again, what feels like the best next step for you today? If it is not launching a new narrative, it's not commissioning a glossy cyber report, a simple Moat test. Just do a test today to see where you are sitting or which is the position of your company. Ask your management for a one-page trusted supplier-proof view that covers, consider all factors, style thinking, align resilient gaps, the top 5 supply chains cyber risk, and what will be independently assured in the next 2 quarters. If that one page cannot be produced cleanly, you have learned something important here. Your mode is still a story, a narrative, and not a systematic, repeatable, or auditable. And if you are in the executive team of a public company and the board needs to protect ecosystem trust during restructuring, book a structured diagnosis session with your team to map sovereignty claims to control evidence, supply chain discipline, and the customer retention risk. Now, so let's pause today. There's a lot to consider here, and let's reconvene tomorrow. Because tomorrow I will show you how boards convert this sovereignty position into a margin recovery by forcing productization of IP, intellectual property, tighter key performance indicators, incentives, and a shift from service brand to a trusted product brand. And if you consider that something is helpful here and you would like to have a chat with me, just reach out in LinkedIn. I'm very happy to understand what is your position, what you're looking for, and if we can help you. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.